What's a mind-blowing obvious thing you've just realized? Story 1. When I was a kid, my dad used to take me to the video store on Friday nights, and he would head into that mysterious back room where only adults were allowed. I used to think he was looking at the horror section. Turns out he was perusing the explicit videos. It would have been obvious, but I was still an innocent child then. Fast forward to my freshman year in high school. CA had this group of senior pals and they all worked at the local video store. One day I decided to pop in and say hi. They were all like, "Hey, come check this out." So they pulled up my dad's account and there it is. Page after page of movie rentals. And if I remember right, some of these movie titles had a certain flavor. Yep, you won't believe it, but my old man rented an explicit flick for my buddies while they were on the clock. Another really silly one happened back in college when I used to order rum and cokes at the bar because I thought that's what everyone else was ordering. Well, turns out I had been mishearing all along. It was just plain old rum and coke. You can imagine how embarrassing it is when I finally figured it out. A rum and coke sounds like a great drink though. Guys, don't follow trends blindly or you'll end up looking like a clown. Story 2. When I first visited the USA, I was flying solo to the Big Apple, exploring all the cool museums New York had to offer, but I kept running into these signs that said no strollers. Now coming from the UK where we all call them prams, I thought Americans were super strict about the level of attention you had to pay while museum hopping. So there I was, pretending to be way more interested in the exhibits than I actually was, just to avoid being seen as some casual stroller enthusiast. Little did I know it was all about baby carriages, not my museum dedication. It wasn't until about day 3 that I saw a no strollers sign that included a graphic for idiots. What's more, I ventured into a supermarket all by myself. So there I am at the checkout and the lady behind the counter hits me with the classic question, paper or plastic? Being the newbie in the land of opportunities, I was utterly clueless about what she meant. So I confidently replied, I have cash. You know what? She was a total champ, never once letting on that I might be a bit of an airhead. Turns out she wasn't asking about my payment method. She just wanted to know what kind of bags I wanted for my groceries. Oops, I guess that actually is a pretty reasonable misunderstanding, right? Story 3. You know, English isn't my first language, and I had this total mind-blown moment when I realized how words like keys, kiss, he's, his, this, these, and all that jazz actually have different pronunciations. The thing hit me when I casually mentioned to my boyfriend that I wanted a keys, and he just looked at me like I'd started speaking in a secret code or something. It was total confusion. Ever since that moment, I've been trying my best to pronounce words properly. Just imagine I had made that mistake when ordering peas. Further, I've recently become aware that I have been living my life with another embarrassing and funny misunderstanding. So I've always heard people talk about pay-per-view, but I'd never actually seen it written out. I thought it was pay-per-view all along, until I stumbled upon it in writing for the first time. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? I just figured that in the old days, people ordered shows off a paper list or something, or paid for a view of something on paper or something like that. But nope, it's spelled out as pay-per-view. It really is confusing how some words can sound identical but mean completely different things. Our brains can really play tricks on us until we see them in writing. Story 4. For the longest time, I had this blunder about the phrase, to a nut. I genuinely believed it meant something like kicking a guy in the shin or maybe giving him a good beating. So whenever I found myself worked up or annoyed with some dude, I'd casually mutter, I'm going to this freaking nut, completely oblivious to the real meaning. My friends always followed it up with laughter, and I assumed it was just because I had a flair for the dramatic. Years passed by, and then one day, my coworker told me about this incredibly rude person he met. Without missing a beat, I said, you should definitely that guy's nut. He suddenly paused, arched an eyebrow, and asked, do you even know what that means? Let's just say I was both embarrassed and horrified when he explained it to me. So for those curious where I'm from, to nut apparently means to give someone a good time. Shame. Real shame. Wait a minute, we can just Google a word if we don't know what it means, right? Or do these people grow up in the era of encyclopedias and rotary phones? Story 5. This little thing hit me recently, at age 32. You know how as kids we'd excitedly write those letters to Santa every Christmas? I just realized that parents have their kids write those letters so they can figure out what to buy them for Christmas. Can you believe that? I mean, after all these years, that thought never crossed my mind. I used to think it was all about the holiday spirit and spreading joy, but nope, there's a hidden parent agenda there. They get a sneak peek at their children's wish list without ruining the surprise. Other than that, I also had this mind-blowing moment when I realized that Michelangelo's David is actually David from the whole David and Goliath story. How did I not know this? I mean, I thought it was just some dude called Dave. And believe it or not, I never even knew that sling was a sling. I thought it was his trousers. Yes, I honestly thought that. And don't even get me started on the rocks. I never really saw those. On a similar note, I only realized a few years ago that David and the Goliath David is the same David as the King David in the Bible. Clearly, I wasn't raised in a church. Psst. Let's be honest. Does your room look dull as Yeah, well, most do. Luckily, I just launched Rufus Rugs. Custom, hand-tufted rugs. And no, this isn't some BS dropshipping company. We have a warehouse in Canada where me and my friends hand-tuft every single rug. So if you're looking to bring your room to life with some awesome anime rugs, or literally anything you can think of, we can get it done for you. From Rick and Morty to The Last Airbender, we've got you covered. Hit the link in the description to get a free quote. Story 6. My bedroom door has been broken for a while, and I finally decided to take matters into my own hands and fix it. I thought the doorknob was busted because it was pushed in toward the door, so I did what I could do and pulled it out. But then it hit me like a lightning bolt. That was actually how you lock the door. I just found out then and there that I'd been living with a perfectly functional door the whole time. Well, we all have our moments of confusion when it comes to modern doorknobs. Some of us grew up with door levers or the traditional push-button types, so maybe it's only natural for me to have a little mix-up there. Also, I had a recent little realization. I used to believe that the villain in Halloween was portrayed by an actor named Michael Myers. As it turns out, Michael Myers is the name of the killer in the movies. Now, thinking about it, it would have been quite funny if he had actually played that role. Confusing Michael and Mike Myers is understandable, but hopefully the real one doesn't come knocking while you're still figuring out how to lock your door. Story 7. I've been on a quest to crack the code of those Chinese characters on restaurant signs for ages. I always wondered what they meant, and it was like a little mystery I carried around with me. But guess what happened just a week ago? I finally unearthed the big reveal. Those characters simply spell out restaurant. I know it sounds hilariously obvious now, but it's one of those things that make you go, why didn't I figure that out sooner? Another revelation dawned on me today. I just realized with those personal injury lawyer commercials are popping up a lot on daytime TV. Well, it's because their clients are often injured, stuck at home, and flipping through channels during the day. Story 8. I've had a lifelong misunderstanding about the saying, you can't have your cake and eat it too. I mean, it's always sounded a bit odd to me. Why wouldn't I be able to eat my own slice of cake? It's my cake, after all. It turns out nobody was trying to deprive me of my cake. They meant that you can't have the cake and eat it. In the sense that you've devoured it, it's gone. An idiom I never quite grasped until this year, and here I am, 27 years old, finally getting it. But you know what? I also realized there's actually a loophole. Have your cake and eat it too. Story 9. I've got to share this revelation that just dawned on me. You know that whole walk the plank thing in pirate ships? Well, I used to think it was some quirky feature pirates installed, like a tiny wooden diving board for their public executions. But it's not. It turns out the walk the plank is just the same gangplank you'd typically use to board or leave the ship. The real threat isn't the plank itself, it's the lack of a nice, safe dock beneath your feet. So yeah, no pirate diving boards. Story 10. I just found out that allspice is actually a single spice and not a mix of cinnamon and nutmeg. You know what? Now I don't even see cinnamon and nutmeg as blends. Now remember how my mom used to make my sisters and I belly buttons for dinner. I was 27 when I realized that they were actually tortellini. But she knew we were dumb kids and would refuse something named so strange even though they were delicious. Also, I just discovered I'm allergic to carrots. It turns out I used to think that carrots making your mouth go all numb was just a universal experience. Like almonds do, right? Speaking of almonds, here's another thing I've learned fairly recently. I also happen to have an almonds allergy. Sounds like someone's been getting into the edible surprises. But seriously, a little research can go a long way. Story 11. This might sound a bit ridiculous, but not too long ago, I stumbled upon the term knee-jerk reaction. For my whole life, I'd been saying it just the way I'd heard it, and I'd always thought it was spelled something like knee-jerk reaction, as if it were some fancy psychology term. So what's a knee-jerk? Well, it's like this involuntary reaction that happens without your brain even getting in on the action. You know, a patient could totally try to hold it back if they really wanted to, but it's not like it's going to pop out of nowhere due to some unexpected stimuli. Nope, it's still going to do its thing, even if you're fully aware of the test. Story 12. Another funny thing I just realized surprised me a few days ago. So I recently moved to a new area, and as I was exploring the neighborhood, I stumbled upon a place labeled Public House. And it was at that very moment when it hit me like a ton of bricks. Oh, that's why they call them pubs. It's short for a public house. But you know what? In Russia, the phrase public house doesn't quite mean what you'd expect. It's more like a gentleman's club than a cozy pub. Makes you wonder, right? Well, I think it's perfectly fine if those snappy abbreviations don't immediately click. Like motel for motor hotel. In some notorious places where people hang out a lot, they just need to cloak it up and make a secret code, don't they? Story 13. I regret to inform you all that just the other day it dawned on me that the game Sims is called that because, well, they're in a simulation. Can you believe it? And here I am, 26 years old and still feeling a bit naive. And another funny one wasn't about me. You see, my sister pulled a hilarious one on me about 2.5 months ago. We were watching John Wick 3. You know that part where the main character went to the desert? Out of nowhere, she turned to me and said, "Are those real?" I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow and reply, "Or what real?" She says, "Sandlands." I burst out laughing so hard I thought I'd lose it. But come to think of it, that's actually a fun idea. Starting a petition to change the word desert to sandlands could definitely add a bit of whimsy to our vocabulary. I think that girl just wanted to be sure. If you grew up watching cartoons, you'd wonder too, right? If you found these stories cool, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more funny tales. Story 14. So there's this girl I know who has a dog named Diogi. I mean, I've known her for 2 whole years and I've been around Diogi countless times. Then one day I'm having a chat with her sister-in-law and I casually mentioned, "I love the name Diogi. How did you come up with that?" Her sister-in-law gives me this puzzled look and goes, "Diogi?" I'm like, yeah, it's such a cool name. She starts laughing and says, no, D-O-G, you know, the way you spell dog? I'm still mind blown about this, even now. It's funny how you can totally miss the obvious stuff when you don't quite catch someone else's language quirks. I guess we all have our moments of being slow-witted. Story 15. You know in Pokemon there's this thing called same type attack bonus or stab damage, where if you use a move that's the same type as the Pokemon, it deals 1.5 times damage? Yeah, I always thought stab was just a catchy way of saying 1.5 times damage. Turns out it's short for same type attack bonus. Who knew, right? It's like the game developers were on their way to make even the terminology sound action-packed. Besides that, another funny fact caught the attention of one of my buddies. Today my friend had this light bulb moment when he realized that pipe cleaners were originally meant for cleaning pipes. It happened when I suggested using one to clean a metal straw since it's kind of like a mini pipe, right? He told me that about 7 years ago, in a rather state because of grass, I found myself attempting to clean out a glass pipe. You know, one of those, man, this is so silly, someone should totally invent a pipe cleaner for this moment. Story 16. You won't believe what I just realized. The houses in Bikini Bottom from SpongeBob SquarePants, they look like car mufflers. And, you know, rumor has it that it got its name from the Bikini Atoll, which was once a nuclear bomb testing site, which explains why the sea life there is so quirky. Maybe it's from all the radiation? And here's a fun fact. Bikinis, those stylish swimwear pieces, are named after that radioactive site too. Who would have thought that a place with such an explosive history could inspire beachwear fashion? Even cartoons managed to slip in some real-life wisdom. It's like a friendly reminder not to toss our junk in the ocean. After all, you can't go jellyfishing and all that trash. Story 17. It's about my boyfriend and his electric toothbrush. He had no clue that it had a timer on it that goes off at 1 minute and then again at 2 minutes. Instead, he thought it was busted. So every time the toothbrush did that little timer thing, which is basically just a brief pause or reduction in vibration, he'd be like, what the heck? I literally just charged this thing. He genuinely believed the battery was on the fritz. Then one day during a random conversation, I mentioned how I liked that my toothbrush let me know when I had brushed long enough. It was like a eureka moment for him. Only then did he realize that his toothbrush had been doing the same thing all along. This is why you should read the manual, even for a toothbrush. Good thing he didn't throw it away. Story 18. I'm in my mid-30s now. There's something that I only realized when I was around 28. You see, it's about my family. I never knew until then that my mom's name was Betty and her sister's name was Wilma. Yes, just like Betty and Wilma from the Flintstones. I asked, and it turns out they were indeed named after the cartoon characters. Fast forward to 2 more years, and my Aunt Wilma casually drops another surprise. They were fraternal twins. This was something I had no clue about in the first decades of my life. My mom passed away when I was young, so I never really got to know her that well or celebrated her birthday. It wasn't particularly close to Aunt Wilma either, so her birthday wasn't a big deal to me either. It seems like everyone in my family knew these things, but no one thought to mention them until Aunt Wilma randomly brought it up. And the confusion is also partly because they both went by nicknames their entire lives. To me, they were never Betty and Wilma. They were simply Mom and Aunt Cookie. She got the nickname since she really loved baking. Story 19. Today I had a radio teach me something. Mariah Carey not only sang but also wrote All I Want for Christmas Is You. All this time I thought it was just a cover she nailed, and people loved it more than the original. Turns out it's the OG. And this might sound kinda silly, but I didn't actually realize my moms were gay until I was almost 14. I mean, I even heard my mom say I'm gay to my grandma as a joke once. I knew that lesbians, same and gay were pretty much interchangeable, but it just didn't click in my head like, wait, my moms are lesbians, which is just another way of saying they're gay. It was one of those coming-of-age epiphanies. Furthermore, I've recently become aware that the Grammys are called that because the awards they give out are actually little gramophones. And I was like, everything makes sense now. Story 20. When I was a little kid, for some weird reason, I absolutely despised toast. I really hated it. My parents would try to get me to eat it, but I'd always refuse. Then my grandma came up with a genius plan. She took some toast, cut it into these tiny squares, slathered on some butter, and dubbed them little pillows. Suddenly I was gobbling them up like there was no tomorrow. It's only now at the age of 22 that I've realized I was just eating plain old toast. So it's true that grandmas truly have the secret to taming picky eaters such as myself. If a kid doesn't like something, they'll magically transform it into a delight. Little pillows for the win. Story 21. Okay, this happened a couple of years ago, but it was one of those moments when I realized something way too late in life. Turns out you're supposed to use the towel to actually dry yourself after a shower. I used to just wrap it around me and wander around until I air dried. I'm 16, and it took me until just a month ago to realize you don't have to crank the sink up all the way. I used to get splashed every time I washed my hands and complained to a friend about it. She casually drops, just turn the handle halfway. And my life has been in the upswing ever since, folks. Let me tell you. Additionally, another thing occurred to me today. I've been living in Greektown, Chicago for a solid 8 years and just realized something. Have you ever seen those blue and white Christmas lights around here? Well, turns out they're meant to represent the colors in the Greek flag. Who knew, right? A little cultural knowledge goes a long way, right? I mean, who knew Christmas lights could be so enlightening? Story 22. I didn't know the characters on Family Guy had accents. I live in New England and I was watching it with my wife, who's not from here, and she goes, "Wow, they really nailed the accents." I'm like, "What accents?" My mind was blown when she explained that not everyone talks like that. And do you know another thing I've just figured out? It's about those people who always seem to know directions so well. You know, like they can tell which way is which, like north, south, east, west, without breaking a sweat. Well, it turns out they're not some kind of magical human compass or anything. They're basically just keeping an eye on where that sun is hanging in the sky. Seriously, why didn't anyone spill the beans on this sooner? Anyway, it's never too late to realize that you don't need fancy instruments to find your way in this big ol' universe. Sometimes you just need to look up and let the cosmos be your guide. Story 22. You know, I've had these moments where I realize that words I use all the time are painfully literal in their meaning. Like breakfast literally implies you're breaking your fast, and afternoon is just after the noon hour. Sometimes I think I'm having this radical realization, but honestly, I'm probably just a bit dense. Maybe I just need to remind myself that sometimes it could help not to overthink too much, because words can surprise us with their simplicity when we least expect it. Changing topics, did you know that I just realized that the division symbol is basically a blank fraction, with dots instead of numbers on top and bottom? Story 23. Guess what? It's called a department store because, well, there are separate departments within the one store. I had a sudden clarity Clarence moment with that one recently. These realizations about things in plain sight are getting a bit haywire. Looking back at these silly experiences, I should say it's really good to exercise those brain cells more often. Speaking of which, I also had one more thing to share. It's really not about me, but my husband just had this mind-blowing moment when he realized that Q is actually pronounced as Q and not Quay. It was mind-blown. So if Q just sounds like Q, then what's up with the other 4 letters? Are they just chilling in the queue, waiting for their turn that's never gonna happen? Who knew that even the most obvious things in life can be so funny when we realize them late? If you're still with me, then you're gonna love the next. What's your I freaking told you moment? Story 4 was hilarious. See you there.